Hi, my name is Mark Trainer, and I wanted to share how crisis has ended up being a catalyst for positive growth in my life, throughout my life. It seems that every crisis I've had, from when I was young to my kids being sick, to just my own personal crisis, has ended up giving me vertical personal growth. And to me, that's really compelling, because rather than looking at a crisis as a negative and something to feel bad about, you can look at it from the perspective that, hey, what's happening? Something good is going to come out of this, and look for what is good, and look for the blessings in a crisis, rather than to have it be dejecting and bring you way down. So generally speaking, I've had a great life. Great childhood, spent some time in college, went in the Navy, had a great 4 years in the Navy, got out, was married, raised a family. Really, everybody has their bumps and bruises along the way, but generally speaking, was just, fairly satisfied with life. Really wasn't satisfied with myself. At different points, I just really felt that I was failing in different areas, and I wanted to succeed in every area. So for myself, I was always personally challenged to improve, to change, and so I was always, since I was a kid, also on a spiritual path, trying to get help from God or my higher power. So about 4 years ago, life was great, but I wanted more. So I decided to hook up with a men's group, try to get some mentorship, and the more I really wanted change in my life for the better, even though it was already great, bad things started happening, or what one would consider bad things. They were crisis, and it ended up being catalyst for positive change, positive growth. So it really started with when I really started meditating and praying hard for miracles in my life, for change. One of my sons shared that the very next day, he was a victim of a violent crime. And that was a catalyst for change in his life. And then a couple months later, my older son shared with me that he was struggling with heroin addiction. And that was very traumatic. Being in the addiction bubble is just very chaotic, and if you're not familiar with it, you have to get familiar with it. So our learning curve to learn all about addiction and how to try to be in recovery, how to try not to die, it just totally changed our lives. And while my son was working on his recovery, we started going to meetings and working our own 12-step programs as family members of addicts. So we started going to 12-step meetings in support of my son. We were going to 12-step meetings for ourselves as family members of addicts, and that was really compelling. That was the beginning of my burning desire to help other people. I could really relate actually more to addicts and what they were experiencing than I could with the family members of addicts in those meetings, because in many cases they didn't get the addict. They really didn't understand what the addict was going through, but for some reason I could empathize with the addicts. And from that, I started going back to school for addiction recovery because I wanted to help, but I knew that I needed more of an education so that I could actually help them. So it was a little frustrating because I was like, well, golly, now I have to get a master's degree in psychology before I can actually help people. Until I was driving down the road one day, listening to the radio, and I heard a TED Talk about crisis text line. And there was a YouTube video that I went and looked at, and it was just very, very compelling. So within a day, I'd thought about it, and I applied to be a counselor, went through training, was accepted, went through training, and about a year ago, started crisis counseling. That was awesome. I didn't have to wait for a six-year degree, and I could already start helping people. So from that training in itself changed my life. It taught me to empathize with people, to validate their feelings, to encourage them, help them to feel empowered, and not to talk about myself. Being a salesman, I was always talking. And so I really never learned how to be a compassionate listener. And that was one of the great skills that Crisis Text Line taught me. About 6 months after I started crisis counseling, my mother-in-law became ill with a terminal cancer. As someone who's been dedicated to showing love and compassion to others, love my mother-in-law, I volunteered to be a caregiver for her. And my wife and I would take turns going to Florida, traveling. We live in the Philadelphia area, so went to Florida, would caregive for her, take care of all of her needs. She was bedridden. And this was a very intimate, emotional experience that for me was just a tremendous blessing. So once again, even in that crisis, was able to find the silver lining, find the blessing. It brought family together. It brought my relationship with my mother-in-law closer. As my mother-in-law was in pain and suffering, it made me reflect. And really the only thing left in my bucket list of things to do in life was to come to terms with my own mortality. So, little did I know that at about my 1-year anniversary as a crisis counselor, I would end up having to take my own advice because I got a diagnosis of follicular lymphoma. I had an incurable cancer. And it was a shock. 56 years old, healthy, active, and this was devastating. But my first reaction, surprisingly, was one of gratitude, of just what a great life I've had, the experiences, the lessons I've learned, the education that I'd gotten over the past several years, going to school for psychology, that my son was in recovery and he was clean a couple years from heroin. I was just filled with so much gratitude that I felt life didn't owe me anything. So, as well, I thought, well, now I have to take my own advice. I have to show myself love and compassion. I need to learn from others, and I need to reach out to others for help and get advice from them and mentorship and engage other people. So from all the lessons and training and the experience that I had as a crisis counselor, it was just very compelling that here a year later, now I have to take my own advice.
I wanna be kind to myself till my love overflows and spreads all around.